So, Jow, last week I think we had talked a little bit about how for you a big personal inspiration was the movie Jurassic Park. And I talked about how for me, like this old ass NES game, Kirby's Adventure was inspiration for me. And for myself personally, that inspiration became me drawing like the character of Kirby. For you, did you ever have like did you either like draw or have any things that from movies where you wanted to try and not necessarily replicate, but like homage or like it was one of those things where you just I need to make my own version of this thing, or I need to kind of make a replication of it for myself.
I think, well, I'm a big horror guy. We all know
Yeah.
this. One of the very first completed scripts that I ever wrote, and I think when I say script, you have to remember this is like Microsoft Word doc in like 1998, maybe something like that. But I wrote a Halloween Michael Myers
Okay.
screenplay quotation mark. Um,
When you
that
say
was
screenplay quotation marks, was it like not a fully fleshed screenplay, or was it just like a
It
scene?
was no, it was I would say at least a good 45 to 60 pages. I
Okay.
had no idea. I had no idea the whole 1 page per minute kind of deal and all that kind of jazz. But it was legitimately just me shoving Michael Myers into my neighborhood on Halloween and just randomly killing people with no story, no character, no nothing. And that was it. And it was literally just that. And then like it kind of like so in high school, one of the things that we did for like video production class, like we just had to do projects, so it was whatever. We would take
Yeah.
songs that obviously weren't ours, that were like a band or whatever. And there was a song by this band called Ra called "Do You Call My Name?" And if you heard it, you would be like, I remember that song. That
Yeah.
song is so long ago. But I did I did a music video of that, and I had my Michael Myers costume from Halloween, and I had my Ghostface costume. Our YouTube watchers can see that I'm wearing my Ghostface shirt today. And what I did was I made a music video to that song, and I basically had Michael Myers and Ghostface killing me and my
Oh.
friends, and that was my music video. So like right off the bat, the very first projects that I was doing were just straight up plagiarism, copying, taking the thing and making it my own, because it wasn't so much like looking at it going, oh, I can do it better, which is kind of how I am now when I look at
Yeah.
something. Back then it
Yeah.
was just I want to play in that sandbox. That was the
That's
mindset.
that's a really good way of putting it, and I mean it's interesting because you just had a baby over the course of
Yep.
between this episode and the last. So since last year, and you're actually probably going to come into contact with that phenomenon that a lot of children's videos have, where the sandbox of um how should I put this? The sandbox of all of the possible IPs in the world are on
Okay.
YouTube, and the most bizarre like videos of like Spider-Man's riding on a motorcycle with Superman and Captain America on top of a giant Mickey Mouse. And there's it's a really interesting new world, right? Because for stuff like that to happen for us as, and I'm going to get to something sooner or later, but for that to happen in our generation, we had to have like all of the cartoon all stars come together to tell you not to smoke pot, right?
Right.
So nowadays, it's plentiful. You can I last night I hung out with some friends for the New Year's Eve thing, and they did like a New Year's Eve for their kids, and the New Year's Eve countdown was just like Paw Patrol, PJ Masks, all these other kid shows dancing for New Year's, right? So
Okay.
anyway, let me get to my actual point. I kind of wanted to just lay this all out to get to this whole notion of we have all these characters. We live in a world right now, I think, where intellectual property kind of flows and swims with each other, and you also have meme culture, right, where people are
Mm.
using all kinds of stuff from snippets of movies to whatever. Um, At what point would you say that, what's the line between original content and just like art theft, plagiarism? Like
Yeah.
when can you say something is your idea? Or maybe even a better way of putting it, so I don't did you ever hear the story about how Marcel Duchamp like put up a urinal as like an entry into an art contest way back at the beginning when there was, Dada art? And he
No.
called it found object art. So this was
He
actually
called he
like the
called it
big
what? He called it
found
what?
object art.
Found
Found object.
object art. Okay.
Because he literally just took a urinal and entered it and put his name on it. And that was like his entry into this art show. So in some ways, that's like the beginning of what we have now today in meme culture, where we have people sort of having found object art. Like, oh, I found this one GIF from The Office, and it has multiple uses now as a reaction to, you know,
Yeah.
some sort of expression or emotion. Uh, is that expression itself like? Does that necessitate art, or is that just stealing something?
Um. Well, see, it's weird to talk about that kind of stuff because, I mean, really, what is original? Do you know, like that goes back to your base question, is like, what is original? Did you come up with this idea, or is it an amalgamation of experiences and emotions that you have felt as an artist, and you're the delivery system or the interpreter of that particular emotion or experience or whatever it may be? And then at what point, when after you release it, does it become fair game for the rest of the world? So you look at things like copyright and you think, well, they put a term limit on it. You know what I mean? Like 77 years or whatever it is, and then it's fair game for everybody to take.
Right.
Um,
Actually, interesting point. Winnie the Pooh just entered into that realm. So now we are about to, unless Disney pulled some like
they
jujitsu,
did.
right?
I don't even have to look it up. You know that they did. Because there's like I'm a big like I've recently gotten heavy into the Universal monsters. And those babies should have been easily into the public domain a long time ago.
Yeah.
And for the most part are, because a lot of the original um, sources for that material were books that couldn't, that just went into the public domain so anyone can take them. That wasn't an original thing.
Right.
So what they started doing was protecting that intellectual property by trademarks, which work different from the copyright. So the copyright is basically the idea, the trademark is the style of that particular idea.
Oh.
So the
So
influence
they,
that the artist did. So like if you have Frankenstein in your movie, you're totally cool. If you have Frankenstein with bolts, a flat top, green skin, you're infringing on trademark, and trademark does not expire. So I think, to answer your question, I'm going to kind of lean towards how the law is kind of going towards it, which is, are you straight up copying the style, as because
mhm,
you cannot copyright an idea. There's millions of people who will go around telling you that they came up with the idea for the Matrix or the
right.
Godfather before that movie was done, and that may be true. They may have. But even right now, if I pitched you a movie and you took the concept that I pitched you, you could go and write your own screenplay off of that idea. And really, I mean, I can sue you for anything, but I'm not going to win because I didn't do an execution of that work. My style has not been impressed upon that idea. So that's the whole thing. Unless I have a tangible thing, that script, that execution of my style, then there's nothing to battle over. So I think the real answer is, how much style are you imparting upon an idea? So if I take Paw Patrol, like you were talking about before,
Right.
and I just straight up copy that design and the character's voice, and you know what I mean, like the color palette and everything like that, I think that's theft because there's no originality applied of your personal style. This is something that you had brought up a couple weeks ago on a podcast,
Yeah.
which is a director's style impressed upon something. So like, you look at the news, everybody's heard about Tarantino possibly directing a Star Trek movie that he wrote.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like, that Star Trek movie is not going to be like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movie. There's no one in the world who can say Tarantino, even though he's one of those people that constantly gets accused of being a thief of art. There's no one that's going to say that that Quentin Tarantino stole J.J. Abrams' style of Star Trek. No, it's going to be straight up Tarantino style, where it's got that homage. It's rooted in probably the original 70s or 60s TV show, but the dialogue is not nearly going to be anywhere near that kind of thing. It's going to be Tarantino style. So that's when it starts getting into differentiations of theft. And I think I'm making my point too many ways.
Right. Well, no, it's interesting what you're saying, because I was just thinking, like, basically, if somebody was like, "Oh, I'm gonna make Paw Patrol, but it's in the style of Tarantino," somebody would be like, "That's a totally original idea," and they would technically be right, even though you're technically stealing two things and then just mashing them together.
Right.
But that's what's interesting to me, as I don't know, like lately I've been looking about how ideas evolve. A lot of the times it seems like often that it comes from the mishmash of different styles and different ideas that were already created, and then within that, that blender effect, something original comes out of it. I mean, it's not necessarily always the case, but every once in a while there are like wholly original things that come out. But usually for us it's wholly original because we just can't see the connections from
Yeah,
how.
we haven't experienced the source material that inspired it, and that's where I think a lot of people get tripped up again on Tarantino. The man has seen so many movies that so many people have not seen, and he's probably seen them dozens of times, and he was able to take, like, he's cherry picking things that are great about those movies and applying them to his own work. And some people hail him as a master of this or that or whatever like that, when really he's found things that other people haven't found, and he's taken them and applied them to his arsenal. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I think the same thing applies when you look at something like meme culture. You have a particular subject matter, whether it be a movie still or a GIF from a TV show or something like that, and someone applies something different to it. And that's been going on for how long? I mean, you just look at, it's the internet version of parody. Weird Al has been taking people's songs for how long, and he does his own version of it, and it's straight up comedy, and that's
In the same
basically what it
way,
is.
in the same way, that's how, I mean, hip hop came to be, is basically taking specific little like music memes or parts of songs
Samples,
and then sampling them in a way where it becomes its own original thing after splicing together or putting together lyrics to go along with the beats. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about right now, as we talk about this subject, I'm trying to think about where to take it, right? Because now we do live in this era where, with meme culture, where there are, let me think about a specific meme. Okay, so there's the meme of the guy looking at the the girls he's attracted to, and behind him is his girlfriend who's like, disgusted, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that whole thing, you don't have to have that picture to replicate it. You can just have the subject in foreground, subject in midground, subject in background. As long as you replicate, right, the basic ideas, you're still participating in the overall language. So I'm starting from a very abstract place of trying to say, like, there are ways that you can incorporate memes creatively. And I'm saying all this sort of to like open up this discussion into a potentially new realm. We'll see. It could be bullshit. Who knows? But as using that example, have you personally ever written any movies or scripts or films where part of what went into maybe a scene or something was thinking on a meme? Because I know I've done it a lot. I actually like the last season of Trailer Park Warlock, I've used a couple of different memes as gags or jokes as a way of just like either breaking tension in a scene or as like a way of just getting a big laugh, because right now, and that's the other thing is like, sorry, I'm kind of I'm kind of
It's
going off,
okay.
but that's the other part of it is there is a possible downside to it, right? Which is that those memes might not necessarily, hold, in a couple of years from now.
Yeah, the test of time. That's always one of those things. I've never directly referenced something. I don't want to call it obvious because I don't want to be offensive to what you just told me that you do, um, for the sake of a gag or something. I have
Yeah.
definitely, not so much memes, but like to me, memes really kind of started with movie quotes. I think every filmmaker or film nerd will tell you that long before the internet was around, quoting your favorite movie in random situations with your friends where you can respond as a movie quote in your head was kind of the memes of the first. That was the back in the old oral traditions of memes, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
was just quoting movies and stuff like that. And I have recently discovered, I've gone back and I've watched digits, and there are numerous movie quotes littered into that movie that I didn't even realize I was putting in there from my favorite movies. If you look in there, there are quotes from Hocus Pocus, there are quotes from Boy Meets World, there are quotes from literally everything that I love
Yeah.
here and there, but weaved into the language of the characters and the dialogue and everything like that so that it works within the scene. It's not an
Yeah.
obvious call out joke, but it's become part of my language. Um, and then there's also times when I've just flat out stolen stuff where I was reading or I wasn't reading Haunted actually. An actress that was attached to it at one point was had read it, and there was a one part, there was a really great exchange between her character and another character, and that was, she had read it and she had loved that part. And then months later, whatever, we were just talking about movies, and I was telling her to watch Scream 2. And I think she had seen it before, but she hadn't really paid attention to it. But she watched it again, and she was like, "My dialogue is in there. They say that scene or whatever in there." And I was like, "Well, yeah." She's just like, "Why did you do that?" I'm like, "Well, it's just a placeholder. The
Oh,
intent of the intent
that
of
makes
that
sense.
dialogue is going to be the same."
Yeah.
But at the
Yeah.
moment that I was writing it, I just stuck in the lines from Scream 2 because I was
Oh,
like,
interesting.
that's my
I've
placeholder.
That's really interesting. That's an interesting way of thinking about it, because I'm sure, like, because I know I've written scenes where I think about previous movies or shows or whatever that I've seen, and it's like, oh, it's going to be like that, and then I have to think later on
Yeah.
about how am I going to mutate it, and that's
Yep.
always where the fun stuff happens, is where
Right.
we figure out how to mutate it. That's the hard part, right? Because a lot
Yeah.
of times the mutation often is figuring out, okay, well, do I mishmash it with some other aspect, like a book I've read or whatever, or is it something from my own personal experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, something I always come back to as the thing of like, that's where I would say the really truly original ideas come from, is like those memories or personal experiences, or those emotions that are particular to an individual based on something that they've had happen in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, uh what's my point?
I think what you're kind of getting at is like there's something, I don't want to say primal about theft, but when something strikes you primal from something that you're seeing,
Yeah.
it triggers like an emotional response from you. And this is my whole thing as an artist. When I talked about my inspiration coming from Jurassic Park, when I watched that brontosaurus walk across the screen as a little kid, like in that moment as a little kid, I was like 10 or 11 years old, whatever, maybe even younger, my first thought was, I want to be able to give this back to other people. I want to recreate this awe, this amaze, this wonderment that I'm
Yeah.
feeling right now because it's just so great. It's euphoric. I want to spread this feeling. So I think the same thing kind of happens. I don't think that a lot of times people go in with malicious intent to say, I want to take that and I want to make money off it because that's what makes money. I think a lot of artists come from a true, honest place where they just want to communicate what they're feeling to you so you can feel it too. Because I think a lot of us feel alone a lot of the times in our own heads, and our art is our way of expressing that in ways that we can't talk about, the ways that we can't sometimes sell in a look. Actors could sell it in a look, but artists or writers or whatever it may be, we each have our particular medium of spreading or communicating our language. So I think what it is that triggers a feeling, and we all just want to go, yeah, that hit home for me. I want to pass that on. I want to keep that going. I don't want it to die. I want people to look at something. Like, I don't want to sound like a hipster, but there's a lot of people that look at something and say, this is so great. More people need to know about this. And what they're really saying, in my opinion, is more people need to feel or experience what I just felt, because this is so moving. And that's where it starts to come in from an artist standpoint. I think from a truly honest perspective, is that's what their aim is to not recreate or steal, but to pass on. It's like I said, oral tradition. It's like keeping it going, keeping it alive. And I think that's where it comes from.
This is getting sort of, so I think part of the reason why I was pausing earlier is because I was starting to kind of veer into, for me, kind of an anxious subject, because I think about it from time to time. There's this whole notion of like, there are no new ideas under the sun or whatever. So I've had times at my most pessimistic or most, dour, where I think, oh, okay, yeah, there's nobody's saying anything new. Nobody, like, I'm not saying anything new. What's the point? Right? Like,
yeah.
I felt like this might end up being the meat of this subject, because if indeed all art is this sort of back and forth communication of old ideas, trying to make them new, does that mean then that there really isn't anything that we can call totally singularly original? And if so, is that a bad thing? Or is that just what it is? And how do you as an artist encourage yourself to not be in that place of like is it an unrealistic expectation? I think originality, I guess that's my question.
Well, and here's my response, because I've been thinking about this subject matter when you pitched it to me last. Yes and no about how you hold yourself to originality, because when it comes down to it, when you release your art, it no longer becomes yours. It belongs to the audience, it belongs to the world for them to interpret as they may. So I look at art a lot the same way that I look at politics, whereas your response to whatever the issue or the theme or whatever is going on is based or rooted in your personal experiences. So I don't think people turn into mustache twirling politicians or whatever like that. Either side you look at it, based off of like these things that are thrown on either side. And the same thing applies to like movies. Like, you see people who love a movie, and then someone comes in and they completely dump on it, and it's like they think you're evil for liking a movie, and it's like, no, it's almost as if you were holding up a Rorschach test, and like someone says, that's a spider, and someone else goes, what are you talking about? It's a banana. And then they start trying to kill each other over it. And it's like, guys, it's a Rorschach test. You're both going to see what you see, and that's the takeaway. So when it comes to art, in terms of being original, you try your hardest to say something primal. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being primal, because you want to speak to a universal audience. Everybody talks about target demographics, like, oh, this is more aimed towards children, this is more aimed towards women, this is more aimed towards old people, da 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 da. At the heart of it all, everyone's going to have a different experience when they see certain things. So they're going to have different experiences and takeaways. And those experiences that you provide to them are original based off of their experiences. So the new experience is based off of their past experiences and their current experiences. If that weird mathematical
equation
makes sense in my mind. That's how I see it. So when it comes to being original, I look at it a lot, and this is one of my, I can't wait till we get into a podcast about this, but I look at food as an art when I'm cooking because I love to
Oh,
cook.
hell yeah.
And so if I look at a hamburger, is a hamburger original? No, it's not. It's not an original thing. It's, you know, two pieces of bread and you got some kind of protein probably in the middle,
Yeah.
or here, you know, the star of the show, and then you have a couple condiments on top or toppings or whatever, and that's it. It's a hamburger. Most people have, you know, a slab of beef, two pieces of bread, some cheese, a little lettuce, tomato, onion, and they call it a day. But if I take, you know, two pieces of fried chicken and use those as the bread instead, and then I take some shredded pork with barbecue sauce and I freeze dry it, and then I take a banana and I air fry it, and then I take a little bit of pickles underneath. You know what I mean? And I make this
Yeah.
weird, hideous, monstrous sandwich that no one wants to eat. Some people are going to eat that sandwich and go, this is they're not even going to look at it. They're going to go, that sounds disgusting. I don't want any part of it. Some people
Yeah.
are going to be more adventurous and say, you know, I'm tired. Like you said, I'm tired of hamburgers. I've had so many hamburgers. I don't want any more hamburgers. I can't eat another hamburger. And then they look at this and they go, you know what? Fuck it. I'm trying this crazy hamburger because why not? And they take a bite and they go, yeah, that actually works. I don't know why that works, but that works. You know what I mean? I've never thought of having pickles and fried bananas together with
Yeah.
pork and da 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 da. And it starts creating a symphony of different flavor notes that occur in your mouth and your brain. And then all of a sudden, you remember this dish that your great aunt Edna made at your 12th birthday party, and you start remembering, and you're like, oh yeah, I had a barbecue sandwich, a pulled pork sandwich with pickles on it that Aunt Edna made, and this kind of tastes like that. And maybe Aunt Edna had banana peels or something in that, and she never told you. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why you love that sandwich. And then someone else who's never had those two things is like, that's fucking disgusting. You're sick and crazy. Get away from me. So
Yeah.
in terms of being original, you know, it's just a matter of, you know, that roll of the dice, that gamble of here's a bunch of things that exist and they all have their spot in the world, and I'm going to take ones that speak to me and I'm going to put them together, and then I'm going to see if I can make something of it within a formula or a mold. And I don't speak ill on those words. I love formula. People cast hatred on formula with screenwriting and this and that. And again, I equate it to food. I'm like, if you're making muffins, you need a muffin tray to form the
Yeah.
mood the right way. But when you choose chocolate or banana or carrot cake or whatever it is you're making the muffin out of, that's your choice. That's how you start impressing your style onto the muffin. So when people do that with movies or TV or comics or paintings or putting a fucking urinal in an art show, that's when I think you really have to be open minded. I think there's a responsibility on the part of the audience to meet an artist halfway when they come into whatever it is, whatever art they're experiencing, to come in open minded and try to find an in. Because there's so many doors to every single piece of art that exists that if you can find your in, see, a lot of people like to talk about representation in media.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, this character represents me, or that thing, you know, spoke to me, or whatever like that. I've been in that situation or whatever. And I think that's a good thing because I think that diversity within an art project allows other people to experience things that they may not have experienced or experience it from a different point of view or whatever it may be. So in
Yeah.
terms of being original, I think you really just need to think outside the box and be open and be part of the audience has to be the part of the experience. And you got to be bold as an artist. You have to make that
Right.
fried chicken sandwich bread pickle banana concoction monster thing in
That's
order.
basically what Trailer Park Warlock is, actually.
Well, no, see, okay. So
It's
explain it.
totally
Break it
that
down to me.
sandwich where somebody would hear it and be like, I don't want to eat that at all. And then there are apparently enough people that are like, oh, that sounds good. Let's try it out.
They're calling it dessert because they know it's good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. And I don't know, man. I think,
I bring all that up too because I think right now, and I think the reason why I'm thinking about this subject too is that culturally there's sort of this feeling right now of like everything's stalled out creatively for a lot of people.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that has more to do with the fact that the people who are stalling out are the people who have been doing it for a while, and like there just isn't enough new blood in it, you know?
Mm.
That's a whole other subject. But point being, I wonder, like, you know, is that because we are participating too much with stuff that has already existed, right? Like, is that because, you know, so much of our culture is recycling Marvel characters, or, you know, like I said, office memes or whatever, you know? And how that becomes part of a broader subject of like, how do you engage culturally to inspire novelty, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, because it can I haven't read, let me put it this way, I haven't read a new comic in about couple years now, which is, I'm about to, by a suggestion of my friend Austin, I'm about to read this comic called Chainsaw Man. And I hope it's good. It looks fun. But even just kind of briefly scrolling through it, like Chainsaw Man, like the guy who's written it, like at the beginning of the book, he just says, "I just like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre." I'm like, okay, well, let's see what happens here. Like it's apparently like an action story that has like a hero who has a chainsaw for a head. So it's
But
really
that's
interesting because
great.
it's kind of like it's something where I'm like, okay, I'm really interested because I want to see how these dots connect together, because I don't see the connection right now. And is that like where we are right now, where it's kind of like we want to see, where creativity right now is mostly about seeing how everybody's dots connect together in their personal life? Not that I don't have a problem with that. It's just like, is that kind of where we are, you know?
I love that you brought that up, because this brings us into a territory, a very specific territory. Star Wars.
Yeah.
Star Wars right now is the most divisive thing you could talk about. You could talk about Trump or Biden and have less arguments than you would if you brought up Star Wars, because there is so much weird things going on in the Star Wars universe. And I don't mean that in terms of the story. I mean that in terms of the story and in terms of production and the art behind it, the creative forces behind it. Like if you remember, before George Lucas sold Lucasfilm, in the early ages of the internet, I believe, don't quote me to this, but I'm 99% sure George Lucas was wholly in favor of fan films. He was one of those people that was like, we're holding fan film contests, and you know, like if you do it, like it'll be part of the universe or it'll be canon or whatever like that, and totally encouraged it. Now you make a Star Wars short film or whatever like that, and Disney's going to hit you with a cease and desist before you can even turn around. Now, granted, a lot of fan art, and this is something that kind of falls into what we were talking about with taking stuff and making it your own. A lot of fan art is terrible. It's just kind of wish fulfillment from amateur artists who just want to recreate the exact same thing they saw and get credit for it themselves. Yeah. That's a little bit, that's almost on the same level of just, you know, let's make shark movies because shark movies make money. That kind of creative drive to me is selfish, and that's polluting the artistic environment, the artistic culture of the world at the moment. It doesn't happen so much right now. But getting back to your point, I think the originality, other than like the style and stuff and how you do it, and even then, subverting expectations is one of the things that, because you're talking about recycle, so everybody's starting to become more in tune with formula and the rhythms and stuff like that of storytelling, and they look at something and they go, okay, I see where this is going. So they get ahead of you, and I think the originality comes from, and then everybody loves it, and this is how I can prove it. When you do a movie twist at the end of the movie that no one saw coming, that's when everyone blows up about it. It's crazy. It's a whole big thing. Everybody can't stop talking about it. It's amazing. Da 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 da. And it only holds up if you set up it right, like you subtly subvert expectations. So the evidence is there, but you didn't see it all along. It was hidden by red herrings and this and that, whatever. And then they twist it on you, and your mind gets blown. That's where originality comes from, because I don't think it's the surprise factor. That's originality, is when the audience didn't see it coming, but it was there all along.
That's a really good point. Is I think I know for myself personally, I'm not experiencing that surprise factor very much.
Right.
Like it's very hard for me to get into movies because it's like I can kind of see. Same with comics, where it's like I can kind of see where this is going. I could feel out what the next couple scenes are going to look like, and so because of that predictable nature, it really loses a lot of that energy. I think
the
probably
spark
the
goes out.
last movie I probably watched where I was like, I started to become invested in it because of the way that it was shot. The story itself wasn't really that interesting, but the way that it was shot dragged me in. And that was I don't know if you've been able to see it, but was Vast of the Night.
I've never even heard of this.
Oh, it's a what did I watch it on? I think it was Amazon Prime, but it's basically like a movie set during the 1950s,
Okay.
and it's about like UFO sightings and stuff like that. But the way it's shot, it's just it's very unique in terms of it's very long takes. You're very like immersed into it because you pay a lot of attention to the acting. What were you gonna say, Jow?
I was going to ask a question. Is this the movie that's set at like the radio station?
Yes.
Okay, I had heard of this movie actually. I take that back. I didn't remember the title, but I know what you're talking about now. And that's an interesting. That's the subverted expectations. I would argue in that case is the limited perspective that they tell that story
Right.
through. And
Right. Like what
yeah,
was subverted is basically like just not the way the story is told, right? And
right.
so there is a lot of value in how you tell a story or how you just get an idea across, right? And a lot of originality can come from that. A lot of originality can come from just like going
Execution.
back to your hamburger, your
Okay.
hamburger
Yeah.
analogy. Like here's a okay, not necessarily a hamburger, chicken sandwich. KFC tried it with the with the
Right.
double down
Yeah.
many years
See, I
ago.
stole that. I stole the idea from that double down. There you go.
The double down, while nobody ate it.
I ate it. I
You
ate
did?
like two of them. Oh hell yeah, man! When I saw stuff like that come out of the restaurant, I always run to it. I'm like, I got when Burger King came out with the Nightmare Hamburger with the green bun or whatever. I was there like day one. I'm the guy knocking on the drive-thru thing, going, "You got the Nightmare Burger?" They're like, "No." I'm like, "It's supposed
This
to be
is
out today." No, we don't have it.
this isn't necessarily derailing from the subject, but I do think that maybe possibly KFC might be heading the avant-garde in art these days because I don't know if you've seen
Oh, the
KFC
KFC
announced
log,
the what?
the fireplace log.
That's new. Okay, I forgot about that, right? The KFC scented log, that's
No.
one. There's the KFC console. It's
The
a
what?
video game console that can warm your chicken.
Get the fuck out of here! Are you
It's a
serious?
Yeah, it's real. And then KFC is doing a Lifetime original movie that's like 15 minutes, or not movie, but it's a 15-minute long whatever, erotica, I don't know.
It's like Mario Lopez is playing Colonel
Yeah,
Sanders, right? Yeah.
yeah. Recipe for Seduction. So I'm just like, why is KFC the one pushing the envelope right now? What's going
And
on?
but that's the thing though, that's so original because we've seen if you okay, look at that. You see that and we're like, okay, Mario Lopez, he's a dreamboat. Okay. We have these cheesy romance movies that play on Lifetime. Okay. Mario Lopez in a Lifetime romance movie. Okay. He's playing Colonel Sanders. What? That's the thing that comes out of left field that no one expects. And like, that's what makes it original is that ambitious, out there, batshit crazy idea that no one would think. It's like Sharknado.
Yeah.
We got
Right.
sharks, we got tornadoes, and then it took off. Now, granted, some of these things are just cheap gags, and then they run them into the ground. Me and you were going to do this at one point. I don't remember if you remember this idea. We were musing about making a movie called Guerrilla Warfare.
I do remember.
We were going to make a movie about guerrillas that were trained to be military, like snipers or something like that. I
Yeah, it
think.
was something ridiculous like that because we were, I think, wasn't it? We were kind of thinking about that's actually one of my favorite sources of inspiration when it's just like, oh, there's a lot of money in this one dumb thing. How can we get into it?
Yeah. But you know something, things like that have their place. Like it's okay. Like I don't think,
Yeah.
yes, good art stands the test of time.
Right.
Um, but I think there is a place for temporary art where it's here, it makes
Oh
its
yeah.
statement, and then it leaves. Like no one should stay at a party forever. Like
Yeah.
you got to go home at some point, and I think some art is meant to perish. Um, but it does contribute to the people that see it and they carry it with them forever. I've seen movies that were batshit horrible that have never been shown again, and you know what I mean. Like I don't even own the DVD, but I could quote you a line from it right now because it stood with me. I don't want to watch that movie anymore. I know that movie was horrible, but that line stayed with me. So like I think there's a place where things like that can come into play and they're important for pop
That's
culture.
also why a lot of live entertainment's very popular right now. Like comedians, live music, like because of the pandemic, it's kind of been stalled a little bit. But as soon as the pandemic's over, I mean, it's gonna explode, right? Because people, I mean, the amount of dance carnivals and like electronic dance music shows or whatever has just grown exponentially over the last couple of years because kind of going to the overall subject, because digital culture, you literally have the entire catalog of humanity at your disposal. You get into this place where it's like, I think it's possible that I've seen almost everything that can be seen right now.
Yeah.
So now the drive is, let's go to live stuff. Let's see, you know, things where spontaneous things will happen in the moment that you can only have happen right then and there. And this
Yeah.
isn't any kind of dig at movies or filmmaking or video games or any of that. It's just kind of describing right now, because we are at this moment where we're so starved for originality that KFC has to like step up
They're
that
single-handedly saving avant-garde, abstract art, like just shooting in all directions. I mean, even you look at some of their commercials. Don't you remember when they had different actors playing Colonel Sanders
yeah,
in the span of a year? There was like 10 actors who played Colonel Sanders, and that was out there. No one ever thought to do that. Like
yeah,
it was just one of those things, and it caught everybody's eye. It didn't make me go buy chicken, but it kept their brand awareness alive. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things. They subverted that expectation. Now, is there a way to fail at subverting expectations? Yes.
all the time.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I go back to Star Wars. You go back to there's a whole heated discussion about Ryan Johnson in The Last Jedi and whether or not the way in which he was subverting expectations worked. Me personally, I applaud his attempt to do that. I don't think he did it correctly. Um, but I think he is a capable, talented filmmaker because I've watched some of
Yeah.
his other films and I've enjoyed them. But at the same time, I think there might have been some corporate meddling going on there because I think there's a little bit of the studio likes the exact opposite. Like the culture or the business culture is this is what works, this is what sells. Don't screw with it. And I think that goes to what you talked about with artists getting stale. I think when someone hires J.J. Abrams, they don't want J.J. Abrams to come into that pitch. Or let me not use J.J. Abrams. I already used him. They don't want Steven Spielberg to come into a
Okay.
pitch and say, I want to shoot everything in reverse. I want the whole movie to run in reverse and I want to flip the screen upside down and I want them to
Yeah.
talk in 3 different languages. They don't want that. They want Steven Spielberg to come in and make a Jurassic Park ET type movie that
Right.
they can slap his name on and put out there and then everybody knows because it's a safe bet. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Every now and
Right.
then we need safe bets because it's just like I want to go to the movie and I want to watch a Michael Bay movie, turn off my mind, watch things blow up, and go home. That's it.
That's an
But
interesting perspective on the signature dilemma, right? Where it's like, because Spielberg seems like to me, like, just using him as an example, he seems like one of those guys who he does like to try new ground and do things that are not like what he's done in the past, right?
he has in
But
the past, but it's still
yeah,
these days now not so much.
yeah, it's one of, but, and so my question and what I wonder is that because sort of like what you're saying, business gets involved and is like, well, we kind of want, the old Spielberg touch. We don't really want, like you were saying, we don't want some sort of artsy scene where, why is ET floating for no reason? Like, why is he rainbow colored? Like, what's going on?
Why is
But
ET starting a brewery? Like like, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, it's one of those
yeah,
things where it's like, it's just out there, and I don't know. See, I look at Spielberg as someone who's like the Mount Rushmore guy of filmmakers. Like, you making a Mount Rushmore of the film directors, the first name that's coming out your mouth is Steven Spielberg. Um, with that kind of clout, he has enough money and clout that he should be able to walk into a studio and say, "This is what I'm doing. Y'all bitches better like it and tell me I'm doing a good job, or I'm walking out the door." Because his name prints money. It's just the point of the matter. And I think there's a responsibility on behalf of artists who make it to that point where they have that kind of clout to throw their weight around. And that's one of the things why I like Christopher Nolan, because hit or miss, like the last couple movies that he's made for me have been misses. They do not work for me a lot of ways. There's parts of them that I like, don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of him because he throws in his weight around when it comes to the studio. He came out and he's dumping all over HBO Max when he's had the most uh, fruitful relationship with Warner Brothers over the last decade and a half. And
yeah,
that kind of bold mentality where it's like, no, we are premiering in a theater. If it's this year or next year, we're premiering in a theater. We're not coming out on TV. We're not doing this. I'm shooting in IMAX. I don't care if it costs more. I'm shooting on film. I don't care. Da, da, da. Like, throwing your weight around. And I feel like more artists, not just filmmakers, artists need to pay their dues to prove that they are bankable elements. But then when you get to that point, you have a responsibility to foster the up and coming generation of artists by demonstrating to them, A, take chances, and B, be bold. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, and
yeah.
you talked about you haven't read a comic book in so long. I haven't either. I've got a collection of them on my bookshelf of the favorites that I've always read, and it's like Jim Lee and stuff like that. I'm looking at it, and like, I follow Alex Ross on Instagram, and I
Yeah.
look at Alex Ross, and I'm like, I remember like the first time I saw Alex Ross's work, and I'm like, this is amazing. Look at this. He painted Superman. He's painting this. He's painting that. It looks breathtaking. Now he'll post something that he did, and I'm just like, oh, it's Alex Ross art.
Yeah.
It's not adventurous to me. It's
Is it
not.
because, I mean, is part of it because what he's posting is same subject matter? Like,
No.
has he overused subject matter, or is it just he hasn't gone in a new direction in his
See,
style, basically?
that's what I think my issue is because like he
Yeah.
did do he did do Universal Monsters. He did the covers of the
Oh,
Steelbook
cool.
Blu-rays that came out. I love it because he
Yeah.
did them in black and white, and it's totally awesome. Um,
Yeah.
but I look at it, and it's still Alex Ross style, and I don't think there's anything
Yeah.
wrong with having your own
I
brand
I know
style.
exactly what you mean. I had that same issue with Mike Mignola, who is the artist. He was the original artist
Hellboy, right?
and creator of Hellboy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for a while he was posting like his drawings of like Godzilla monsters, Pokemon, whatever. And I was like, "Oh, interesting." But then when I looked, I was like, "Oh, it's kind of just the same pose for every character. It's kind of just the same thing." And I don't feel like he's made any adjustments as he's like grown as an artist, which is something that for myself, I personally kind of I worry about. I don't want to get too stuck in that signature thing, right?
Yep.
That's always that seems like that is always the dilemma, because on a certain level, in terms of financial security, there can be a lot of accolades that go with sticking to the signature. But in terms of like artistic integrity, maybe not always.
You know the expression. I'm sure you've heard this expression. How can I miss you if you won't go away? Do you know what I'm saying?
Hey,
So
yeah,
when I think about an artist, I think about that in terms of their style.
yeah,
When if I you got to build up. It's like supply and demand, hype,
yeah,
and controlling all that. There needs to be a cascade. There needs to be a decay. That's the word I
yeah,
want, of hype for your art. So for me, I made Digits. It's a very grounded, realistic, in terms of its visual aesthetic and all that kind of stuff, mockumentary type movie. I'm working on Terror House and Haunted, which horror movies, they're slightly more stylized, but still I'm trying to base them in grounded reality where it feels very kind of gritty in real life. I've already determined that whatever project I work on after that to bring to life, it's going to be so crazy stylized, it's going to make Speed Racer look like a documentary. Like
Awesome.
I'm coming to the point where I, as an artist, am getting bored with my own work. And that's when I feel like, yeah, I've gotten set in the motion where it's like, okay, I can write it like this or I can do that. Same thing with my writing. So like for Haunted, I have a whole trilogy mapped out in my head. Like every crazy writer, creator has a whole franchise built on this one idea that they think is hitting. And already in the outline that I have for the second film, I have what I've called a protagonist switch mapped out. So that's something you don't particularly see in movies these days, where you start with one person who's the clear-cut hero protagonist of the movie, and then halfway through the movie, there's a gear shift, and all of a sudden, this other side character that was there but was kind of sidekicky or whatever takes the center stage and carries the rest of the movie to the end.
I like
And
that kind of stuff a lot. Yeah, because
yeah,
like you're saying, it isn't something you see too often, and it's kind of nice when it happens. I mean, in my opinion, it is. Like,
there's
for
so much
example,
benefit to it.
yeah, for example, like one of my favorite examples is the manga for Akira. So Akira, there's the movie, which is about 2.5 hours, right? And it's this animation spectacle. The manga is like 6 volumes. It's gigantic. It covers so much space, and there's an entire volume, and this has stuck with me for forever. There's an entire volume where the main character Kaneda, he's not there at all. He like I can't remember quite what happens, but like he just is gone. And so you suddenly have this time to really sit in with the rest of the world and kind of
Mm.
get to know all these other characters who have been important to the plot, but have always been kind of in the background or to the side or, not in the forefront. And this is a bit of a different example. It's not necessarily a protagonist switch, but it is like just because I don't feel like that even this happens that often in stories where you just get to see and hang out with the other characters that much.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the way that storytelling in Western culture is very heavily, what's the word? Like hero of a thousand faces kind of a thing where you have one person, it's their story, and they go through their hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, for myself personally, and kind of hearing what you're talking about, I like to think about how it's multiple heroes' journeys and it's allowing them to meld together into this like heroes fabric essentially where you have all these
Mm-hmm.
threads weave together, which I mean, I will give like the most recent Star Wars trilogy had a certain amount of that sort of aspect to it, especially in the last film. The last film really felt like it was all these different threads coming together. As much as I don't even care for that movie, I do like that part of it where it's
Mm-hmm.
like you have all these, and I mean that's similar to the very first trilogy. But anyway, you have all these, you have all these people come together, and you have like this ensemble of
Mm-hmm.
heroic fiction, basically. But I'm
Right.
sorry, please go on with what you were talking about earlier in regards to your own
Oh
plot. From
well. See, the thing is, and the reason why I wanted to do that protagonist switch, not only because it's like how you talked about with Western culture and the art and storytelling, how it centers on one character and that's it. For the first film of Haunted, the way the screenplay was written, I isolate that character's perspective as the only perspective you see the entire film for purpose, not because she's the hero, but because the driving force behind the entire movie is this mystery plot of, is this real? Is this actually happening? Are people getting murdered, or is this all part of the show? So in most horror movies, somebody has to go out to the woodshed because the lights went out and turn the circuit breaker. And then we follow
Right.
Timmy go to the woodshed, and then the killer kills Timmy. And then we go back to our final girl who's in the cabin wondering where Timmy is, and da 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 da. And it's all spelled out. For me, when I was writing Haunted, the mindset for me was it's better if we stick with the girl, we stick with our hero. Timmy goes to the woodshed. Timmy never comes back. We don't know what happened to Timmy. Did Timmy get killed, or did Timmy just clock out for the night and say, all right, I've done my part in casting doubt into this girl's mind, so I don't have to continue doing this? And
Yeah.
that raises questions in the audience's mind and puts them on the edge of the seat. So for me, I'm exploring that concept, that artistic style, I guess you could say, or execution of storytelling in this
Yeah.
film so much that I am just, for lack of a better word, raping that idea and that concept for every nugget of tension and interest that I can find. I'm leaving no stone unturned, no corner uncovered, none of that. So when I get to another movie, everybody's going to think, okay, who's our protagonist going on the tour this time? Are they going to find out evidence? Da 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 da. For me, it was like, no, I've done that story. I'm bored. I don't want to tell it again. But this concept allows me to do a protagonist switch where I can have somebody come in who was a friend of the main character in the first movie who's now going on the haunt to try to find the answer for themselves. Halfway through the movie, they get a different answer or something. I don't want to spoil anything. And somebody else who's either in the tour or that they or like one of the people who participates in the haunt, um,
Mm-hmm.
it takes the lead of the rest of the movie. And that to me was interesting enough for me to revisit the concept and further my themes through a different vehicle. So it was kind of like what I say, I'm not going to be a hypocrite and try and hold the artists that I love to a different standard than I hold myself. I don't want to be repetitious. There's a time and a place for repetition, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to be repetitious so much in my style. I think my style is going to be trying things and failing and doing new things. Like when I brought Haunted to, there's a screenplay group. I run I don't run it, but I go to a meetup group in my local
Mm-hmm.
area for screenwriters. And I brought Haunted, and it went over famously, pat on my back. And everybody in the group was rant and rave, and they love it, yada yada yada. A couple weeks later, I come back and I submit a project that I'm currently working on. It's a short film. It's a Christmas story about Santa Claus who finds a present in his bag when he gets back to the North Pole after delivering the presents Christmas night. And he freaks out. He thinks, oh my God, I forgot to deliver this present. Little Johnny or little Katie didn't get the doll or the train or whatever
Yeah.
it may be. What did I do? And then he looks at the present and it says, to Santa Claus. And he's like, wait a minute, somebody snuck a gift into my thing? And the little subtitle on the tag says, don't open until Christmas. Well, he looks at the clock, and right then and there, boom, it's midnight. It's December 26th. And he thinks, okay, well, whatever, I'll open it. And bam, Mrs. Claus bats him and says, no, 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 you got to wait a whole year before you can open this present. So the rest of the short film covers Santa Claus trying to be like a little kid does, scratching the corner of the thing to see if he can see the box, putting it through an X-ray machine, having like all these things, trying to figure it out, blah blah blah. It's a short little Christmas comedy film about Santa Claus and trying to find out a present and this and that,
Yeah.
compared to a horror mystery movie about a person trying to figure out if the people she's walking through the woods with are getting murdered by monsters. And someone said to me, you're not this kind of writer. You're not a kids movie family comedy writer. You're a horror
Mm.
movie writer. That's you need to stay in your lane. And now these are all amateurs at the thing, just like me. And I'm not an amateur, but you know what I mean. I don't want to
No,
aggrandize
I get what you're
myself too
saying.
much, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, but then he's telling me, he's like, you need to stay in your lane. You need to write horror movies. And I just looked at him. I'm like, dude, I'm so bored if I
Yeah.
just write horror movies. I can't do
Right.
it. I need to write an action movie. I need to write a comedy. I need to write a kids flick. I need to write a horror movie that is rated hard R. And I need to write a horror movie that I can show my 12-year-old that's rated PG. And it's still scary, but it's not like crazy F bombs and gore and this and that. Like,
Yeah.
I need that for me as an artist. to breathe. I need that originality. I need that. So to me, originality, I don't know how I got on this tangent or whatever, but the idea of being original comes from exploration, adventure, trying new things, executing the same things differently, going out into left field, making Mario Lopez my Colonel Sanders. That's
Yeah.
that to me is not theft. That's creativity.
That is a
That's
really
it.
great summation. That's a great summation of that of everything we've just talked about over the last hour. I think I mean I we could go on, but I think that's a pretty good place to leave off because I'm going to second what you're saying that exploration is one of the most important parts of an artistic creative life. Being able to go into places that you've never been because that's where you will do the most I don't know if I'd say accurate, but you'll do the most interesting observations and you'll do the most interesting that's where the most interesting work will come from. Whether or not it's good is a whole other thing, but it'll be interesting. But go on, Joe.
I want to tag on one thing. Not that I haven't ranted enough this episode. I think you maybe talked for a total of 8 minutes in this whole thing. Here's what it comes down to, and I'm going to try and make this simple. Every art form, whether it be movies or music or comics or whatever, when an audience comes to it, they are searching for growth or meaning. It's like religion. They're looking for purpose that they can take away from it and apply to their own life. Like, as you've pointed out in the past, the tarot cards, the subconscious wheel that turns when you flip over the cards and you read into it and you unlock parts that you never saw. So when someone can equate something that they have seen in a movie or a comic to something going on in their life, the primal thing or whatever, and pull something from your art to take away, that's when originality matters. Because if you're just saying, if every movie is saying the same thing, then I'm not tapping into different parts of my own life, and I'm not discovering things like we talked about, exploration. I'm not discovering things. I'm not confronting my fears. I'm not growing as a person. So I think originality is those risks, that adventure, that exploration that pulls out new experiences or new observations or new lifeblood from its audience.
Yeah.
So
That
that
I've never heard originality described in that way necessarily, and that's why that's why I like it, because I don't really have a good, for myself personally, I don't really have a good definition for originality. Because it's like one of those words that it's one of those words that kind of exists where it's like there is a definition for the word, but the way people use it, the word itself becomes the definition, right?
yeah.
So I like that because it's actually a very useful, it's a usable way to like approach, doing something new, doing something that is very difficult to replicate because so much of culture right now, and I'm for probably forever, will always be some kind of method of replication, right? And so it's figuring out how in that process of replication to make sure that your own life is imprinted on it, which is, as an occultist, as above, so below. So I would say that's a great way of like a great analogy to how genetics work. So as somebody who is now a father, like that's another way in which you have imprinted your own experiences in a way, and same for your wife, for your child, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
We took two ideas, or two people, if you want to get analogous about it, two people, put them together, made a third thing. We made its own thing.
Yeah.
That's originality right there. That my kid is original. Do you know what I mean? And that's the beauty of it, is that sometimes even those two things can come together again, and they will make something else that's completely different from the thing that they made before. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of life, man. That's originality to me. I think this has been a great topic. I think we've gone farther than I think we expected to when we were saying, let's talk about memes and art theft. You know what I mean? Like, I think this has gone a little bit deeper, but I think we really tapped into something, because even some of the stuff that I've said today, I don't think I thought consciously until I said them today on the podcast.
Yeah.
So this has been growth for me. I don't know about you. I hope it's been growth for the
I'm
audience.
going to be taking that concept of originality with me away from this for sure, because I'm going to be thinking on it a lot because I liked it.
Anybody who's listening out there, if you guys want to weigh in on some of the topics that we're talking about, me and Rainwater are pushing this thing on Twitter, and I don't know if Matt's pushing it anywhere else. I only really have a Twitter. I'm giving up so
Yeah,
far. I'm pushing
Instagram as
Instagram.
well. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can. I talk about on Instagram sometimes. So,
But at the moment, this is now episode 6, I believe. Me and Matt have discussed that around episode 11, after we've locked down 10 of them ourselves, we're going to start opening up to guests. So if you want to come on here and talk about some art with us, a good way to do that is to start throwing out your opinions to us on Twitter when we post clips and we post the stuff, so that we can kind of get to know you and see if you have some observations or things to offer us. Because I think diversity is one of the keys in originality, is having different points of view and different things like that. So even if you disagree with us, I think that's great. So open up and engage with us on some social if you want to, and comment on our YouTube video. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts. This coming week, I believe we are going to be up on Apple Podcasts, so look out for that if you're an Apple user. This has been great. I hope you guys took away some stuff from this. I definitely did. Matt just said he did. I hope you guys did. I'm repeating myself now, and I think that's when we should decide to end something. The shark movies are over, because now we're going in circles, and I'm not going to do what I did in episode 2 and loop this episode. I won't ever loop an episode again. I promise, just because I've done it and we're over it. I have been Jow.
this is Rainwater. We'll talk to y'all later.
See you guys next week. Take care.